So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are streaming from. It's exactly 5 p.m. UTC +3. So we are going to start our webinar today. Our webinar is being hosted by Crisp Excel Training and Consulting. These are our partners in Kenya and outside Kenya. Today we are privileged to have Claire. Claire is an Excel and Power BI trainer with over 35 years experience. Areas of expertise is data visualization, Power BI, and entire corporate training. Please follow her on LinkedIn and also check out her website. She has interesting courses, and consider buying one of her courses either in Power BI or Excel, and also read her blogs. She has very interesting blogs on her website. So today the topic is data visualization, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So Claire, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm going to make myself visible. So thank you very much for inviting me, Crispo. And
welcome.
I'm looking forward to just talking about data visualization. I thought before I'd start, I'd just tell you a little bit about me. So if it's all right now, I'm going to share my screen. And one thing I will say as I go through is if you've got any questions, do feel free to interrupt and ask. I may or may not be able to help, but we'll see where we go with that. So I'm just going to share my screen. Share that one, I think. And hopefully you can all see that now.
Yeah,
is my screen up okay there?
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so a little bit about me before we get started. I'm based in England. It's winter here. It's very cold. So it's lovely and sunny at the moment. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon for me, but it's below freezing point. We've got frost on the ground, ice on the roads. It's quite unpleasant. So this is me, Claire Squibb. My organisation is named Excel Stuff, and I've been training Excel for a good while now. So you'll know from my white hair that I'm quite old. My very first computer was the Apple II, and it had 48K of RAM and 1 floppy disk drive. That was a 5¼ inch actually floppy disk drive. The first spreadsheet I used was actually on that machine. It was VisiCalc. VisiCalc was released in October 1979, and I had a job change in November, and I know I was using it before the job change. So I was working for a medical company, and even back then, although VisiCalc didn't have a charting capability, we had a special program that enabled me to do charts using a graphics tablet. So I would do measurements measuring the top and bottom of a dose twitch, the top and bottom of a little graph with a pointer on my graphics tablet, and it would turn it into a chart. My first training job was in 1987 when I worked for an information technology centre teaching young people, 16 to 18-year-olds, and I started out there using SuperCalc on an Amstrad PCW. Then as things moved on, we got into Lotus 123, and eventually when Excel came out, it was Excel version 2 on an IBM PC. So I've been working with spreadsheets since they first came out. Around about 1991, I had my first child. So between 1991 and about 1994, I was mostly at home, but I gradually picked up more training work, I went back to my training organization and did external courses with businessmen. So I was teaching business people Excel, Lotus 123 and Excel to start with. And when I went back, having had my son, I discovered that we'd got Windows. So we went from DOS to Windows while I was out on maternity leave. And so then it was Excel on Windows, version 5, version 7, version 97, version 2000, and so on through the list. So I've been running all the subsequent versions, and I'm currently running Excel 365 on the Insider Preview channel. I am a trainer, I'm a developer, and I'm a consultant in Excel. I also do Power BI training, and I'm just generally a mad passionate fan of Microsoft Excel. There's so much you can do with it. I absolutely love it. Quite shortly, next month, I shall be going to the Global Excel Summit in London. So hopefully I'll see Crispo there, maybe, I don't know. Do you have plans to go?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
But I'm planning it, yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't been to any of the abroad ones yet either, but as we've got it in London, I shall go. I went last year and I was very pleased to meet Victor Momo and various people and, you know, meet all my superstar heroes. It's a good session. I hope to get some more talks and some training and some videos going on through the year. And in my leisure time, I'm heavily involved in music and I sing in a choral society. And I've got a couple of music holidays and events coming up. So as relaxation from Excel, lots of singing. So that's a bit about me. Let's think about data visualization in Excel.
Someone is already asking whether you have a YouTube channel.
I don't have a channel yet. I mean, it is something I want to do. That's why I say hopefully some videos. At the moment, if you like, I've been doing too much training to spend time doing the videos. I'm actually aiming to reduce the amount of training work I do and actually get my YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel, but I want to start recording videos and putting data out.
Yeah, okay.
So there we go. So data visualization. It seems to be all that anybody talks about these days. It's very much the latest thing. Except, is it? In 1786, this chart was produced by an English man analysing imports and exports between England and Scandinavia, Denmark and Norway. And he was actually, and it's very much the sort of chart you would see nowadays. This is one of the earliest data visualizations we're aware of. So we're talking, what, 240 years nearly? So it's been around for a long time. We've got the line here. The line of imports is the orange line at the top. And we've got the line of exports, which is the red line. So this is England exporting to Scandinavia. So the left-hand section here is the balance against, where the imports are more than the exports. But sometime around 1752, 53 probably, it actually crossed over and we started exporting more than we were importing. So a very good data visualization spanning 80 years worth of data and going through £10,000 each of these scales. So this is £100,000, 200,000 and so on up the scale. So a very good simple data visualization that I think we could all more or less recognize based on an Excel chart, if you like. Data visualizations can get very complicated. This is another very good early example of an extremely informative and complex visualization. So this was a chart made in 1869 by an engineer, French engineer called Charles Minard, and it's a flow map. So the actual lines are showing activity, and that shows Napoleon's march on Moscow and retreat from Moscow in 1812 to 1813. He did it when he retired, so it was a long time after the event, but he'd been planning it for a while. So there's a massive amount of information here, but yet it is still very clear to read. The orange line to start with, the width of the line, the width of the ribbon, is relative to the size of the French army. So they started attacking the Russian troops. Napoleon's army was trying to fight the Russians, but the Russians retreated. And as they retreated, they were burning the farms and the fields and the villages so that the attacking French couldn't get any food. So the French followed the Russians all the way, and this is about 1,000 kilometers from, I've forgotten the name of the place, but basically from Lithuania across to Moscow. It was about 1,000 kilometers. And during that time, they had various battles. They had to cross rivers, and they were finding less and less to eat. So the army was dwindling in size because people were just dying of starvation and illness. Eventually, they got to Moscow, but by the time they got to Moscow, they were so depleted that they had to turn back. So the return journey, again, we saw them going back. Now, the bottom section here is actually showing the temperature. And the temperature here is going down into sort of -20, -30 degrees centigrade. And it just got colder and colder. More and more people died as they went back. So this enormous army that left with 400,000 men, by the time they got back, they had 10,000. So it's a very, very informative chart. It shows the number of troops at each stage of the journey. It shows the direction of travel and the distance. This is actually based on the actual map. It shows the actual rivers that were crossed. These little curly lines are the rivers, and a lot of the river crossings, people lost their lives. It shows the temperature on the retreat from Moscow, and it shows the place names at key positions on key dates. So very informative. Data visualization has been around for a very long time and has become very sophisticated even then. So I'm going to start off with why we need to visualize data. One of the organizations I follow is called Maven Analytics. I don't know if you've come across them. They've got quite a lot of very good data to play with. They have a data playground that you can download data from. And there's a good amount of stuff that you can get before you have to sign up for a paid account. So I use their data, and I've done a couple of free courses, and I've actually downloaded. So they've come up with the 15-second test. And if you look at this, we have 4 products, and the average is the same. The median is similar, and the standard deviation, there are 2 sets. There's a 5-1 and a 2-1. So the statistics are similar, but you should, if you look at those for 15 seconds, would you be able to tell me anything about that data? So I'll give you 15 seconds. Okay, has anybody got any insights about that data yet? I will show you what happens when we visualize it. Just looking at the figures doesn't tell you a great deal. But if we look at the data in charts, you can see that the different data sets are given quite different charts. So product A, you can see that on the whole it's steadily rising, but something happened in June. So you would want to explore that. Product B is showing a fairly standard sales growth curve. It starts off fairly slowly, it increases through the summer, and it tails off again towards the winter. So this is possibly a summer-based product or an autumn-based product, and people are buying it through May, June, July, August, and then it tails off again once the winter comes. Product C sells very little until there's a giant boost in October. Maybe that was some sort of sales promotion. And product D is overall going down, but there are spikes in March, June, September, and December, which is possibly some sort of quarterly seasonal thing going on. So completely different profiles for the different sets of sales. This is used by Chris Dutton of Maven Analytics, gave me permission to use this. So I've given the details there for you to go onto their website. Now, this is actually based on a very famous set of visuals called Anscombe's Quartet. So Francis Anscombe was a British statistician. And again, we've got these figures. So I've got the 4 sets of data, 10 readings for each. And if you look at these figures, they are actually all identical. And they genuinely are, because these are all Excel formulae. So you can see that we've got Excel formulae everywhere. And they are all coming up with the same information. Okay, so at least as far as the number of decimal places displayed, they are identical. And again, they have a very different profile depending on what you're looking at. So set A, trending upwards, but scattered quite widely. Set B has a very smooth curve up and round. Set C actually appears to be trending upwards rather less, but there's one outlier. And set D, everything is exactly the same except for one outlier. So all of the actual statistical information is the same, but the charts again are very, very different. And yeah. Now, another thing I'd like to point out about these is I'm using a couple of data visualization techniques here. So to point out the things that you need to be thinking about when you're working with doing data visualization. It's all very well producing a chart, but if you're going to produce a dashboard or a series of charts and visuals on one page, have a think about how they're laid out. Okay, make sure they're properly aligned. Make sure that things are the same size if they're displaying the same type of data. Be very pernickety. Data visualization is almost as much about design as it is about data. So it combines those things, and if you're particularly careful with your design, it will go a long way. So getting your data, I've put a little tiny shadow on these so they're standing out from the background a little bit. That's quite common. You could go for rounded corners, things like that. And a good way to do it is to start one chart and then copy it and edit it to have the other data, so that you've got identical charts as you go. Get rid of extraneous data. So I haven't got grid lines and I haven't got labels that I don't need and things like that. Now, we will be looking at a chart later on, but what I'd like to do is ask in the room, just going to turn on the chat here. I'm just going to ask, what is this chart telling us? So is anybody, I'm keeping an eye on the chat here. If you'd like to type into the chat what you think it's saying. You don't need to be able to see what the chart is. You've got enough to get an idea.
Is that a decline?
It looks like a decline. It certainly does. Okay, so whatever it is. Sorry, CRISPR.
No, I'm saying people can unmute themselves or they can type on the chat.
Yeah. So any thoughts? Looks like we've got a red line going down. And I'm going to tell you this is a genuine chart that was printed in a newspaper. We will be revisiting it later on. So the point of a chart is to tell a story. So data storytelling is the important thing. And again, borrowed from Maven Analytics, I have some guidelines that I would like to introduce you to. So when you're producing visualizations, make sure you choose the right chart for the job. Okay, so if you're comparing data across categories, you're comparing one category with another, or you're ranking data, then use column charts or bar charts. I'm just going to zoom in on this a little bit for now. So column charts and bar charts are very good for doing comparison between sets of data or showing things in ranked order, particularly if you're using Power BI, by the way, which is where I've pinched these little thumbnails. So Power BI is very good because it's very easy to sort the axis, the data into axes. Composition charts. If you're looking at the component parts of a whole, then pie charts are okay. Stacked bar charts or column charts are quite useful because then you get to see the whole amount and also how it's broken down. If you have a hierarchy of data, so perhaps you've got years broken into months, or you might have a geographical hierarchy with states and counties. Okay, so if you've got 2 layers of data, you could use the tree map. And that allows you to break your data into sections and subsections. If you're looking at changes over time, it is conventional to use line charts or area charts if you want to fill them in. If you have relationships between data, you might want scatter plots or bubble charts. Bubble charts display a third dimension. So a scatter plot shows your data in 2 dimensions where you have 2 numerical axes that you're trying to plot against each other. The bubble chart will show a 3rd dimension, which is the size of the bubble. So the X and Y axis tells you where to put your bubble, and then the size of the bubble is your 3rd piece of numerical data. Distribution charts. These are quite often used by serious statisticians. We've got histograms, which are bar charts usually divided into equal-sized bins. So if you've got data going from the lowest price to the highest price, it would actually split it into so many containers, however many containers, and it would just take those bands and split it into equal proportions, and you'd see how many fall into equal buckets. A Pareto chart is like a histogram, but it puts all the items into descending order and tells you how far through the data you've got at the same time. That's very useful. And the box and whisker plot shows you your data gathered around 2 standard deviations from the mean. So these are fairly statistical, very powerful. Obviously, if you have geography, you're likely to want to use maps. And if you're looking at contributions to a total, waterfall charts are very good because you can see where your profits and losses come. If you've got stages of a process, then a funnel chart. So something like a sales pipeline where you have a number of leads, then the number that you've contacted, then the number who are actually interested, then the number you're having meetings with, and then the number that are actually buying from you. Each one of those stages gives you fewer people than the last, so it's centered around a center point, and it comes out as a funnel shape, which is why it's called a funnel chart. And there's performance measurements for radar charts. Okay, so they can be quite useful, where you can compare scores over multiple metrics. So all sorts of different charts for different jobs, and they can do a lot of things. Let me just go from there. So I'm just going to start off with common mistakes here. So common mistakes is too many segments in pie charts or donut charts. Maven Analytics has specified the right number of slices in a pie chart. I'd quite like it if people would like to type into the chat or speak and say how many segments should you have in a pie chart as a sort of as a normal maximum. Feel free to type it into the chat if you want.
I think 5 is okay.
4, 6, 5, 4 to 5. Okay, so we're getting into the 4s and 5s. That's good, because I often get people say 12. I had somebody say 100 once, which was quite exciting. So I'm going to tell you what Chris Dutton of Maven Analytics says. So Chris Dutton says that a pie chart should have 2 slices, or 3 if you absolutely have to, and if the slices are different, very different in size. So it's a problem there. So the problem with the pie chart is it takes up a lot of space for the amount of data it gives you. And also it can be very difficult to spot small differences. Anybody who's done a child's birthday party with a round cake and 11 screaming toddlers, you know that there will be tears when you cut the cake, because somebody's going to have a slice that's much bigger than somebody else, and it's not fair. So we're not very good at angles. We're much better at lengths and heights. If you've got lots of categories, if you've got 4 or 5 categories even, you're going to be better off generally displaying it in a column chart or a bar chart. Everybody says, oh, but they're so boring. But the reason they're so boring is that they're incredibly easy to read. They're used all the time because they're just easy. Nobody has to struggle to understand a column chart or a bar chart. Don't use line charts for comparing categories. if you are selling bananas and mangoes, okay, it's either a banana or a mango. There isn't a sort of halfway point, a bonago, okay? So you don't slide from banana to mango. It's one or the other. You do slide from today into tomorrow. So this is why you use line charts for time data. So the flow of time is a continuous thing. So we can use line charts and area charts for those, but don't use them for comparing categories. Don't use tree maps or sunbursts for non-hierarchical data. I'm just going to zoom in quite a lot more here and show you that little image of a tree map. So if you look at a tree map, it's a rectangle divided into sub-rectangles. Now, I wouldn't be able to tell whether the blue square at the top left is bigger or smaller in area than the tall, thin white rectangle. So a tree map, if you don't have hierarchies in it, it's just a space-filling tiling exercise. And it can be really difficult to tell. If you like, it's almost like a pie chart, but worse, because it's just filling a space full of shapes. But it can be hard to tell which is bigger or smaller. If you've got a hierarchy, then at least it's showing how the two different areas, the blue area and the white area, split up. Sunburst maps are similar, except you can have more than one layer in your hierarchy. But again, they're very, very wasteful in size, so they tend not to be used a lot. Don't use unsorted data. If you're going to create a chart, put it in a particular order. Now, that might mean sorting your source data. If you're in Excel, the chart is picking up its order from the display in Excel, in the Excel table. So sort your data in the table and the chart will be sorted into the correct order. And finally, and most importantly, get rid of noise. Get rid of chart clutter. So every element on a chart that you create is something that the user has to look at and work out whether, you know, what information it's bringing. So don't give them more information than they need. If you've got a chart title that says sales by month, you don't need to label the x-axis month and the y-axis sales. So get rid of the axis titles. If you've got data labels, then you don't need the y-axis telling you how big the numbers are. Oh, looks like I accidentally muted myself there. I hope you didn't miss much.
Not much.
Not much. Okay. Yeah. So I was just saying, don't put in elements that you don't need. So I'm going to start off with looking at some good charts. And to do that, I'm going to build a few charts in Excel. So I've got a chart, I've got a table here of data. Not strictly a table, but there we go. So I'm going to start off by selecting just this data and make it into a pie chart. Now, I have got my menus hidden in order to maximize my screen space. So just bear with me when these pop out. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to insert a chart. I'm going to insert a pie chart. And I have not selected my data. Let's try that again. Why? So the data has to be the same size. Okay, so you can see what I mean about slices in a pie chart. It's pretty bad. You can just about see that this green one, December, is the biggest, but if I said which is the second biggest, who knows? Okay, you'd have to put data labels on it and find out. So it's really not a good starting point. So I'm going to change this to a line chart because we are looking at a time series. So chart design, change chart type, and make it a line chart. Now that is actually a much better chart. So you can see, for instance, that we got reasonably good sales in January, but they're falling in February and March. So perhaps people have got some Christmas money. Okay, they got some money for Christmas. They've gone shopping in January at the sales. Then it all goes down a bit, but then we get sales going up quite steeply through to May and staying high really through the summer. Okay, May, June, July, August, September, and then rising up again towards the end of the year. I can add a trend line, and the sales are trending up. So really, without any more help, this is telling us some useful things. Sales are rising over the year. We've got a dip in the spring, in the early spring, but after that, peak of sales in May and in December. So not too bad. Now, I always recommend when I'm training that you kick the data around, you play with data visualizations, because you can find out quite a lot about it. Now, I'm going to just bring in some more data. Rather than looking at the total sales, I'm going to look at CDs and books only for now. So here we have the idea of telling a story. So the previous story was saying that we had good sales in January, dropped down through to February and March, and May is a good spike and we sell well through the summer and then increase in the autumn. Here you can see that on the whole, the orange line, books, is below the blue line, CDs, but there are two places where it actually overtakes them. January, we've got high book sales, and in July, we've got high book sales. And I would suggest that we could, depending on your shop or whatever, this might be down to people spending Christmas book tokens. A lot of grannies give their children book tokens for Christmas. So maybe those are increasing book sales in January, and maybe the higher sales in July is people getting ready to go on holiday and buying something to read on the beach or on the aeroplane or whatever. And obviously, again, high sales in December as people generally buy books as Christmas presents. So there we go for those. So those are your high points for books, and they could very possibly explain those sales. Let's change it again. So I'm going to go for a clustered column. I shall get rid of the trend line now.
Good.
Okay, cluster column. Yes? Was that a question? No. Okay, so this is a clustered column here. You can see that relationship between CD sales and book sales, with books almost always below CDs. I'm going to just take a data series and make the gap a bit narrower. I find those wide gaps is quite annoying. So let's change that. So that just thickens the lines and only leaves half the size of the column as the gap between the sets. Now, one of the nice things I like to play with a chart is switching row and column. That's a very quick and easy thing to do in Excel, and it allows you to see your data a different way. Now, on this occasion, I would say that's too complicated. We've got 12 bars for CDs, 12 bars for books. If I put DVDs in, we'd now have 36 bars on there. So that's really too complicated. But if you are showing a lot of data, maybe going for a stacked column so that we're seeing how it breaks down. And then that is actually rather more meaningful and useful. So this is the overall sales for the year of CDs, with the coloured bars broken down by month, and the books. So that gives you a clearer picture. And we can go back and switch that row and column again. These are the total sales by item, by month rather. So we've got the total sales by month. And there you go. So again, changing to a different view. This is the 100% stack. This is very useful if you want to see the proportion. So each of these add up to 100%. You can see that on the whole, here's 50%. On the whole, the books are over 50%, at or over 50%. Yeah, the CDs are at or over 50%. So that gives you your proportional split. I would advise you when you're working to avoid 3D charts. Okay, they can be very, very silly. Okay, and one way or another, they can be pretty useless. Let's go for that. So if I now put in, for instance, the DVDs as well, this is called a cityscape view because it's like being in a crowded city with a whole load of skyscrapers. And you'll see that although I've added a third set of data, you can barely see it anywhere. There's a little tiny peeping out there of DVDs. But really, that's about it. So these blue and orange skyscrapers are hiding the grey ones completely, pretty much. So this is one reason why we don't go for 3D charts. So good charts and bad charts. Have a think about what you're displaying and play around with them. Change things up. I'm going to undo and we'll go back to something sensible. Okay, and in Excel you can do things like adding a chart title, and if you want to use a cell reference in your chart title, you can do that as well. Now, in order to do that, you actually you can't just type the formula here, you must enter it in the formula bar. So just for now, I'm going to turn my formula bar back on. And I'm going to say equals this cell here. And you'll see that you've got a cell reference charts exclamation mark B3. Even though it's on the same sheet, you have to have that absolute sheet reference as well as the cell reference. And then if you want to change that data, so because it's referencing that same cell, it comes up. So have a think about laying your charts out properly, not including too much data. So I could show data labels here. And format them so that they have a semi-transparent label so that you can see them a bit better. That'll do. And if you do that, then you don't need the axis and you don't need the grid lines. And if I go back to showing the total sales, we could then show our data labels at the top.
Requirements, comma, and the components.
Yeah, it really doesn't want to go there. There we go. So depending on your chart type, you've got different things that you can look at. That needs to be changed again. There you go. So just a few simple tweaks and you can get a much nicer chart as you go through. If you want to show that in data order, sort this column. There you go. So different ways of displaying your data and getting a decent chart out of it. How did I move across to select the total sales? So when you click on the chart, it shows you which elements have been selected. So I actually started out with the CDs and the DVDs. So I'm just picking up. You can fiddle around with change data, but to be honest, it's really quite hard work. So I had a three-way chart. I just shrank it to be one column wide by using this drag handle at the bottom, and then used the move handle to move that whole series right so that I was picking up the total sales. So Excel's very easy just to do that with. So quite useful. And there we go. So moving on, I would like to talk to you about bad charts, things to avoid. The notorious 3D pie chart. Okay, now this verges on the ugly. This verges on the misleading charts. So there are charts which are so bad that they're actually giving you the wrong impression. And this is more or less it. If I say to you, which is the biggest slice, anybody want to suggest? So which is our biggest category? Yellow.
Green.
Yellow one, yeah.
Yeah, the yellow one is the biggest category. So if I go on here and add some data labels, actually I'll make them into call-outs so that we can read them. You'll see electronics is 14%, games is 17%, videos is 15%, trinkets is 14%, which is the same size as electronics. So the dark blue and the yellow are the same size, and the orange. So I will say that if you ever see a chart presented like this, ask to see the numbers. They're quite often used by politicians or by salespeople. Look at how well we are doing compared to our nearest competitor. And it's deliberately misleading. So quite often they're trying to make the slice in the front look better than it is. So it's something to bear in mind. So what I'm going to do now, actually I'm going to move on, I think, from there. So be careful about that one. Try and avoid cluttered charts. Okay, you're not going to get any useful information out of this. There's too much going on. You could go through. So if I was to hover over the filter button here and hover over one, that's not so bad. So what you could do is take your own company, okay, let's say your BMW, and you could color that and then maybe change all the others to be formatted differently. Yes. Moving further over, these are just simply bad charts. These are perfectly real charts that have been displayed, but UK politicians and topics they discussed during the general election. Nicola Sturgeon talked about the SNP. This is just about visible, but an awful lot of the people, Nigel Farage talked about David Cameron. Or perhaps David Cameron, no, I think it's Nigel Farage talked about David Cameron. I don't know. You know, I have no idea how this is actually working. It's trying to cram much too much data in. Nobody can actually make sense of it. Here's a chart about large learning machines, large learning models, data AI. So AI machines, it tells you what the owners are by color. Apple and Chinese are almost identical. OpenAI and Chinese and things, I don't know that I could tell the difference between those. And it doesn't even tell you why some of them are diamonds and some of them are circles. And I don't know what this line represents. So there is a genuine chart that's got just too much information on. So a couple of really bad charts there. Just wondering. Okay. Now I've come back to this newspaper chart, and I want to just show you what it was all about. So I'm going to move this out of the way. Here is the actual chart, recreated in Excel. This was published in a newspaper, and it needs a little bit of changing. So first of all, it was the Olympics. Okay, different Olympics from 2000 to 2024. And I've just got time to change it up. So just going to change the column title. Okay, so this is actually showing you the information. And is that right? Yep, this is actually Ireland's position in the Olympic medals table. Okay, so the y-axis. Ireland came 64th, and then it came 14th. 14th is better than 64th. So we actually want the axis to be the other way around. Okay, 64th is bad. So it's improving. This puts the x-axis in the wrong place. We want to put it with the high value. Does that go? Horizontal axis labels. So we'll put it next to the high values, and it is Ireland. So I think we can change the color. Because for a start, it's Ireland, and also it's good. So there is that chart, rather improved. They should have presented it like that. There's one final thing just to point out, which is a fact checked, because actually Ireland didn't come 14th in the 2024 Paris Olympics, it came 19th. So it's not quite as good as it said it was. So I think we're all right there. I've got just a couple of charts here, just to make you think. Be careful about these things. There's our 3D pie. If I go down, these are what they are. If you see a story, electronics doing great, big yellow slice, shocking increase in house prices, somebody is trying to tell you something, misleading. This doesn't start anywhere near zero, this axis. To get a more accurate picture, electronics third after games and videos. House prices go up a bit. It's not quite so exciting anymore, is it? Watch out for emotive labeling, people trying to make you feel something. Watch out for 3D images. Watch out for your axis not starting at zero. Watch out for pie charts not adding up to 100% or pictograms. Just some examples to look at. Average height. Look at this tiny chap over here in Indonesia. Okay, we're starting at 5 foot. It's 5 foot to 6 foot. It's not actually starting at zero. There you go. Average male height really looks more like that. This is a genuine political chart. I have no idea. Certainly doesn't add up to 100%. Politics is the best place to find this. Here, you can't even, I couldn't even create that. You have to draw it yourself. 109 and 104 are the same size, and they're both bigger than 114. Who knew? Okay, so there's a lot of silly things going on. I've given them to you. I'll be sending these through. You can have a little look at them. They're all here. They're corrected. These are genuine flyers from our last election. Okay. Looking at the people there. Lib Dems 42%, bigger than Conservatives 49%. Who knew? So that's the sort of thing. Watch out for it. I hope you've had some fun with it. The ones with humans of different heights, that's actually quite an interesting one. It's just they've taken a graphic and they've just resized it to go to the right place on the axis. Possibly they've done it by putting a bar in and filling it with, you know, transparent bar and filling it with the picture of that icon. But the problem with that is it gets sized in 2 dimensions. So the actual area is a quarter of the size if it's half the size, if you see what I mean. If it's half the height, then it's a quarter of the size. So yeah, it can be very, very misleading because it makes it much smaller area-wise as well. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it and it's making you think about data visualization.
Interesting session. Very, very interesting session. Have you ever attended one of Carlos Barbosa's session? You know Carlos from LinkedIn?
Yep. Yes, I haven't seen his.
He also makes interesting charts and dynamic arrays, but yours was interesting, like the things that people need to watch out.
Mine's more about this. Yes,
Sorry?
it's sort of less about the technicalities of making charts and more about thinking about the visualization aspect.
True. So I wanted to ask, like in your 35 plus years of training and using Excel, have you ever had an instance where you had to use 3D charts? Because I've never had an instance where 3D charts came above any other charts that was available.
They came out, I think, in version 97 when Windows was able to, actually, it's probably about version 7 now I think about it, but when we had Windows and everybody just got very excited by how much the computer could do. And so they came up with this 3D, and it was great for sort of glitzy graphics, but it's really bad for data. Lean and mean is what charts should be like now.
True. Is there anyone else with a question? You can unmute yourself. You can type in the chat. This was interesting. This was an interesting session to start with for the year. I saw one Excel expert saying that pie charts are the most evil charts and they should be avoided at all costs.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Okay.
Pie charts have very little use.
Yeah.
I've got one instance where I use a pie chart. So one of my examples I do in Power BI has a bubble chart showing the size of the sales, but there are only 3 categories of sales. And so if you put that into the legend in Power BI, it gives you a pie chart in each of the states of the United States showing 3 categories of sales, and that's not too bad.
Okay. How about donut charts?
Donut chart is useful if you want to use a pie chart, but also show the overall, the figure of the overall total. So the whole is good for putting the total in. I've never used in Excel, you can have them, but I've never successfully used a multi-ring donut.
Okay.
So showing more than one data series, that's just like having one pie chart inside another, and it's hard on the eyes and the brain.
True.
It's Michael, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Unmute yourself, Michael, and ask a question.
Thank you. I think it is somewhere I watched, I think through Minda Tracy, that pie charts are for eating. Pie is for eating and not for presentation.
Yeah.
And so I think from that statement, I've always hated presentation done through pie charts.
Yes.
Wherever, and I think it demonstrates that whoever is doing it is not professional at all.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree with that. Yeah.
Or
I mean,
maybe they're trying to hide some information.
There are very occasional uses.
Yeah.
Yes, I have an exercise about sales of pie, which obviously you have to display as a pie chart.
Not necessarily.
That came from Oz du Soleil, that one.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Godo, you had raised your hand. I don't know whether you still want to ask a question.
And no, Chris, it's okay. Thank you.
No. Okay. Anyone else with a question? We are done with the hour. You thought you didn't have enough information, but we are done with the 1 hour.
Yeah, I will be sending the file to Crispo, so you can publish it and put a link.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll share that.
Yeah,
So
I'll bang that up sort of straight away.
Yeah. Rashohe Mudoni, you can ask a question. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for the session. I just want to know, maybe from you or the other attendees, where you guys getting gigs from? Which online forums are you getting gigs from to get more experience on Excel? Because one of the better ways of learning is through exercise, and you might as well earn while you are exercising. So which are the trusted platforms where one can take Excel or Power BI or Tableau gigs?
What gigs or learning? Do you mean presenting?
Both.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of very good learning resources. I would say, I mean, obviously YouTube has a massive amount, but sites I go to particularly, I follow Leila Garani. I follow Excel is Fun, which is Mike Gervin on LinkedIn, on YouTube. They're both extremely good, and you can, and basically, as far as gigs goes, I'm fairly new to the speaking game, so I don't know too much about that yet. So I'm going to say Crispo, obviously. He'll be looking for people to present data.
I'll let Michael answer. Okay.
Yeah, I think you need to follow professionals like Crispo. Like follow them through LinkedIn, and you learn quite a lot. From Crispo, I think every weekend, if you are able to follow with these types of people that he brings around, like Barbosa, I'm sure one of these days you'll manage to get us Mike Gavin and even Leila. So I think with these professionals that you bring around, we have learned a lot, and from the links thereafter. Thank you.
Yeah. Start joining Excel groups. If you join Excel groups on LinkedIn and things, you'll soon pick up some very useful names.
True. And also for gigs, what I get is that the more you share value, the more people see the need to give you a gig. Like people DM me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. So you go with the intention first of sharing value and supporting the community, and you get a gig on the way. And you need to blood yourself, Rashohe, as an Excel expert, create content, share content. So that's how you get gigs. But if you go straight to somebody like Claire and ask, can you give me a gig? First of all, they need to know how much do you know and how much can you contribute.
Thank you, Crispo.
Yeah, so,
thank you, Claire.
yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Start creating content, start sharing content. You get a gig. For sure, you get a gig.
Yeah.
There's somebody asking about when Price was here and he presented on Python. I'm seeing whether he can come back and present more on advanced Python, especially the doing charts with Python. So hopefully by the end of the year, we can get him.
Yeah.
Yeah, time is much spent. I don't know how much more time you have, Claire, but I just wanted to ask you, in your 35 plus years of training and doing Excel, what is one advice that you like to give somebody who is starting, or somebody who, actually somebody who is starting with Excel?
Well, if somebody's starting with Excel, I like to just point out that you don't have to be too frightened of Excel. It's built on very simple building blocks. So a lot of people are quite nervous about Excel, particularly now that, you know, it's grown so much in the last few years, and we've got lets and lambdas and dynamic arrays and all the rest of it. And it's really, you know, there are people out there who are doing things that terrify me. Okay. But if you're just starting out, you don't need to worry about that. So if I don't know if you know Lego bricks, but you know, a small child can stack a couple of bricks together and build a tower. And you can start off like that with Excel. You've got these very simple units that you can start with. So once you've got a little bit of basic understanding, and you can learn formulas and functions and add a few things up. That's actually all most people do in Excel. A little bit of adding up and multiplying and dividing and the sum function. And that will take you quite a long way. And then you just add a bit more as you become a bit more confident. So there are some basic functions and things that I would put in early on. So obviously sum and average and min and max, and if, and some lookups of some sort, and get into Excel tables, and then you're pretty much ready to go. But you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to sort of build the Empire State Building scale model out of Lego as your first project.
True. Also about your courses, would you like to explain more about your courses, how much you charge?
Yeah, my courses are so I do training on Zoom. What I normally expect to do would be to take a group of people, and yes, and that would be in the region of £300 a day.
Okay.
So
you don't have any online course, any recorded course somewhere?
I haven't got recorded courses at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an area that, as I say, I've been meaning to get into, but it hasn't happened yet. And this year I'm hoping to reduce my training and start doing some recordings.
Okay.
So yes, I do online live Zoom training at the moment, and I do prefer training live because then people can ask questions, or if somebody is struggling, you can help them through.